When you buy a house, you have this incredibly strong illusion that you are purchasing a fortress.
Oh, absolutely. The castle doctrine, right.
Right. You lock the front door, you shut the double-paned windows, and you draw this hard, impenetrable line between the human world inside and wild nature outside. It feels entirely binary.
You're in and nature's out.
Exactly. But then, you're sitting in your living room, maybe reading a book late at night, and you hear it.
The scratching.
Yes, a distinct scratching sound, or like a faint, frantic chirping. And it's not outside the window, it's inside the wall, inside the ceiling. And suddenly, that fortress illusion completely shatters. You realize your home isn't a sealed box at all.
Not even close. I mean, it forces this ultimate shift in perspective. You are suddenly looking at your own home through the eyes of an opportunistic wild animal.
Right.
To them, a house isn't a human sanctuary. It's a landscape of caves, perches, and climate-controlled hollows just waiting to be claimed. It's prime real estate.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources from the Critter team. They operate out of the Huffman and Humble area down in Texas. We're going to try to understand exactly what happens when that fortress fails.
Yeah, and it fails a lot more often than you'd think.
Okay, let's unpack this, because on the surface, bird control sounds like a totally mundane weekend home maintenance chore.
Yeah, like cleaning the gutters.
Yeah, you picture shooing a pigeon off a balcony or something.
Yeah.
But reading through these documents, the reality involves navigating strict international legal frameworks, executing literal biohazard cleanups, and managing high-stakes fire prevention.
We are looking at a masterclass in how urban wildlife adaptation forces us to constantly defend our living spaces. I mean, these birds are not just confused animals accidentally wandering indoors.
They know exactly what they're doing.
Exactly. They are actively exploiting human architecture. And undoing that exploitation safely and legally requires a surprising amount of, tactical and biological expertise.
So to understand the mechanics of getting rid of these birds, we first have to understand the geography of why they're targeting this specific area in such massive numbers. The Critter team's primary theater of operations is Huffman, Texas.
Right, which is a very unique geographical spot.
Yeah, Huffman sits directly on the eastern shore of Lake Houston.
And that lake is, it's an 11,000-acre reservoir. In the world of avian biology, a body of water that size acts as a massive ecological magnet.
Oh, for sure.
It forms a central flyway for virtually every bird species moving through the broader Houston metropolitan area. Birds use those waterways to navigate, forage, and breed.
So you have this incredible natural feature, and surrounding it, you have these heavily wooded lots, open grass corridors, and a really diverse aging mix of housing.
Yeah, the housing stock there is key.
You have older 1970s, 80s, and 90s ranch homes sitting right alongside newer custom builds in subdivisions like the Commons of Lake Houston, Fairway Crossing, Riviera Pines, and Huffman Hills.
It basically creates the perfect ecological storm. You have the essential water source, abundant foraging grounds in the suburban grass corridors, protective tree canopies, and then dropped right in the middle of this thriving ecosystem, thousands of man-made structures.
And this is exactly where the physical architecture betrays us. A lot of Huffman's housing stock is crossing that 20 or 30-year mark now.
Which is when things start to break down.
Right. The documents note that vent covers and chimney configurations from the 70s and 80s simply were not designed with modern wildlife exclusion in mind.
No, they really weren't.
We think of houses as static objects, but over decades, materials shift. Wood warps under the intense Texas sun, caulk and sealant shrink and crack. A soffit section where the roof transitions might pull apart by just a fraction of an inch.
Yeah, and that's all it takes.
What was a totally tight, weatherproof seal 20 years ago is suddenly an open door today.
Because to human eyes, a half-inch gap under an eave is just a minor, cosmetic structural flaw. But to a cavity-nesting bird, it is a glowing neon vacancy sign. It is all the space they need to breach the exterior envelope of the home.
I get that a tiny gap is an entry point, but I have to push back on the underlying logic here. I understand that our aging homes act as luxury preheated birdhouses.
Right.
But are you telling me a bird's evolutionary instinct completely overrides the fact that a human house is terrifying?
Terrifying how?
Well, a dryer vent has scorching hot air blasting through it. A bathroom exhaust fan is loud, it's metallic, and it smells like chemical cleaners. Why actively choose that chaotic synthetic environment over, I don't know, a quiet, peaceful tree hollow right down the street? Are they just desperate because of deforestation?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the primary evolutionary drivers for these specific animals.
Okay.
It comes down to avoiding predation and surviving extreme weather. A natural tree hollow might be quiet, sure, but a rat snake can easily climb that tree. A raccoon can reach its hand directly into a wooden hollow. And a severe, driving Texas thunderstorm can flood a natural nest, completely chilling the eggs.
Oh, I see.
Now compare that to a human house. A house is practically a predator-proof vault. Snakes and raccoons cannot easily navigate the smooth, vertical interior of a galvanized metal vent pipe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The home offers internal climate control, shielding the nest from the worst of the Houston heat and the torrential rains. Plus, synthetic building materials don't rot and collapse the way a dead tree eventually will.
Wait, so they aren't desperate at all. They are literally upgrading.
Precisely. Human homes offer environments that simply outcompete nature on every single metric of survival. We've inadvertently turned our own architectural aging process into a permanent, high-end ecological advantage for them.
Which means we've inadvertently built a massive climate-controlled bird sanctuary.
We really have.
But who actually moves in? The sources identify 3 specific culprits, and reading through this, the legal framework surrounding them completely changes based on their evolutionary history.
Yeah, this is where it gets incredibly complicated.
You aren't just dealing with birds in a general sense. You are dealing with entirely different classifications of law.
The species identification is the single most critical variable in the entire extraction process. I mean, the specific biology of the bird dictates the law, and the law rigidly dictates the homeowner's available options.
Okay, so first up, the cavity nesters. We are looking at house sparrows, which are also known as English sparrows and European starlings.
Right.
When these 2 species cannot find a suitable natural cavity, they instinctually seek out human architecture. They go for dryer vents, kitchen range hoods, chimney flues, or anywhere a pipe penetrates the exterior wall of the house.
And the crucial detail about both house sparrows and European starlings is that they are non-native.
Meaning we brought them here.
Exactly. They were artificially introduced to North America by humans. Because they evolved in completely different ecosystems across the Atlantic, they lack the natural population controls of native species.
So they just multiply. Yeah, rapidly.
Yeah.
As a result, they are highly invasive, actively outcompeting native Texas birds for limited resources.
And because they are an introduced invasive threat, they are explicitly excluded from the protections of the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act.
Correct.
The state of Texas takes a very hard line here. The law dictates that the nests, the eggs, and the birds themselves can be destroyed or removed at any time, completely without a permit.
Right. There is no red tape.
Yeah, if you have an English sparrow packing debris into your dryer vent, there is zero legal roadblock preventing its immediate forceful removal.
The state recognizes them as an ecological and structural nuisance. So it effectively gives homeowners and pest control professionals the green light to prioritize the safety of the human structure over the survival of the invasive bird.
But then the documents highlight culprit number 3, and the entire situation flips.
The grackle.
Yes, the great-tailed grackle. These are those sleek, iridescent black birds you see common all over the Lake Houston corridor. But here's the massive twist grackles are native to the region.
Yes, they are. Therefore, they are heavily protected under Texas state wildlife law.
Which completely alters the operational playbook. This raises an important question, right, about how we practically balance private property rights with native ecological preservation.
Right, because you can't just evict them the same way.
Exactly. Because the grackle is native and protected, you cannot simply remove them the way you can a starling. Lethal control or nest destruction requires specialized, hard-to-obtain state authorization.
And the documents note the critter team explicitly does not do that. They refuse to step into that specific lethal regulatory minefield.
Yeah, they rely entirely on exclusion tactics. And grackles exhibit very different behavior anyway. They rarely nest inside narrow cavities or structural vents.
Oh, really? Where do they go?
They are communal roosters. They gather in massive, concentrated flocks outside, choosing trees near roof lines or flat architectural surfaces like commercial parapets.
And when hundreds of large birds gather in one spot, they leave mountainous accumulations of droppings. The sources cite this as a massive health hazard under Texas Parks and Wildlife guidelines, actually physically degrading the building materials and creating a toxic environment below the roost.
It gets really bad. But the law allows you to install physical deterrents, things like bird spikes, commercial netting, or wire tension systems, just to make the architectural landing areas physically uncomfortable.
Oh, gotcha. So you can annoy them into leaving.
Pretty much. You are allowed to change the architecture to naturally repel the bird, but you cannot harm the native bird itself. This is why professional assessment is mandatory. The timing matters tremendously.
Because of nesting season.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If an inspection happens before the nesting season gets fully underway, the homeowner retains maximum legal flexibility to install these deterrents.
But if they've already laid eggs?
The moment a protected native bird lays eggs on your property, your legal options narrow to almost zero. You are essentially paralyzed until those chicks naturally mature and fledge.
Wow. Wait, so the exact species of bird completely changes what you're legally allowed to do on your own property?
100%. It is a completely different ballgame.
So you're legally paralyzed. You can't touch the nest if it's native. But while you're waiting, or if you're dealing with an invasive starling inside your home, the physical dangers to the property escalate rapidly.
Extremely rapidly.
The term nuisance birds drastically undersells the actual physical threat level here.
Oh, yeah. When birds breach specific household systems, we move from a cosmetic annoyance to an acute structural emergency. The mechanics of these hazards are severe.
Let's look at the drier events. Sparrows and starlings construct their nests using dry grasses, dead straw, twigs, and discarded feathers.
All highly combustible material.
Right, they are cramming a massive volume of highly flammable tinder directly into the exhaust path of a machine designed to pump out scorching hot air.
Think about the actual physics of how a household clothes dryer operates.
Uh-huh.
It relies on unobstructed airflow to vent moisture and heat. The internal heating element frequently pushes exhaust air temperatures well above 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow, so when that 4-inch metal exhaust pipe is physically plugged by a densely packed starling nest, the hot air has nowhere to go. It backs up.
And that airflow restriction forces the dryer's heating element to run constantly. It's desperately trying to trigger an internal thermostat that cannot read the correct temperature because the air isn't circulating.
So the heat builds exponentially, baking the already dry nesting materials.
Exactly. Suddenly, you aren't just drying clothes. You are actively superheating a tinderbox inside your walls. The friction, the heat, the lint, and the nest combine to create a severe, highly probable ignition source for a devastating house fire.
That is terrifying.
And the most terrifying part is that the homeowner usually only notices their clothes are taking like 2 cycles to dry, totally unaware they are living on the edge of a catastrophic thermal event.
The fire hazard is acute and immediate, but the biological hazards lurking in the attics and chimneys, they operate on a much more insidious level.
Yeah, the biohazards are a whole different nightmare.
Let's look at the attics. When birds get into that expansive space above the ceiling, they bring in nesting debris, but more importantly, they leave vast amounts of guano.
Right, the droppings.
And that specific type of nitrogen-rich bird waste is the perfect breeding ground for a microscopic fungus called Histoplasma capsulatum.
And this is where the biological mechanism becomes incredibly dangerous for humans. The fungus grows in the soil and the droppings.
Okay.
As the guano dries out in the intense baking heat of a Texas attic, the fungal spores become completely dormant, microscopic, and incredibly light.
They just sit there waiting.
Yeah.
And the hazard triggers the moment the homeowner decides to go up to the attic to grab some holiday decorations or, sweep up what they think is just a dusty mess. The second a broom hits that dried guano or a shoe steps on it, the microscopic spores instantly aerosolize.
They become an invisible cloud.
Once aerosolized, they are easily inhaled into the human respiratory system. When those dormant spores hit the warm, moist environment of a human lung, the biological response is severe.
The body's internal temperature actually causes the fungus to transform into a yeast-like state, triggering an infection known as histoplasmosis.
Wait, really? The heat of your lung changes the fungus?
Yeah, it adapts to the host environment.
The sources make it clear this isn't just a bad smell or a mild allergy. This is a severe respiratory disease that can require hospitalization.
Oh, absolutely.
If those aerosolized spores get sucked into the home's HVAC system, the ductwork actively distributes the pathogen through every single room in the living space.
And this specific biological mechanism is why the Critter Team's cleanup protocol is so rigid. A technician cannot just go up there with a trash bag.
Right.
They are mandated to wear full personal protective equipment, including industrial respirators. To prevent the spores from ever entering the human living space, they run specialized vacuum lines externally, routing them through the outside soffits or directly through a roof vent.
They treat the bird guano with the exact same stringent biohazard isolation protocols they use for highly toxic bat or raccoon waste.
They have to. It's that dangerous.
Diagnosing where this hidden hazard lives requires a really trained ear, too. If you want to know if birds are actually inside a chimney flue as opposed to just hanging out on the exterior roof, you have to monitor the acoustics.
Yeah, listen closely.
If you hear scratching or a hollow chirping that continues long after you've made noise and stopped all activity on the roof, they are physically inside the masonry. You might also notice a musty biological smell or find twigs and nesting debris falling straight down into the firebox.
Identifying the exact location of the breach is critical because the homeowner's natural instinct is almost always the exact wrong move.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the natural DIY homeowner instinct, the moment you spot a gap under the eave or a missing vent cover, is to just plug it.
Of course, that's what everyone thinks to do.
You run to the local hardware store, buy a piece of mesh or plastic cover, and immediately slap it over the hole. Problem solved, right? But the sources highlight this as a catastrophic failure.
Sealing a vent without aggressively confirming that the entire length of the duct or wall cavity is completely empty is a massive unforced error.
If you do that, you are essentially capping a boiling kettle. The kinetic energy has to go somewhere. If you trap a wild, highly motivated bird inside a wall cavity, it does not just calmly go to sleep.
No, it panics.
Yeah.
Its survival instinct kicks into overdrive.
It will relentlessly seek the path of least resistance to escape.
And the path of least resistance is rarely the exterior work or the heavy metal vent you just sealed.
It is the soft interior drywall.
Exactly.
The trapped bird will cause massive frantic damage to the flexible ductwork, shred the insulation, and literally claw at the sheetrock trying to get into the living room.
It's a nightmare scenario.
If it fails to break through, it eventually exhausts itself and dies inside the wall structure. Now, you have moved past a nesting problem. You have a decomposing animal locked inside a confined, unventilated space behind your drywall.
The cascading consequences are awful.
The decomposition gases create an unbearable odor that permeates the house, and the decaying organic matter immediately attracts secondary infestations of blowflies, maggots, and carrion beetles.
This is why the tactical sequence of operations is non-negotiable. It must always follow a strict timeline. Comprehensive inspection first, physical removal and clearing second, and sealing the structure absolutely last.
Altering that sequence exponentially multiplies the damage.
Without a doubt.
Given the severe biological health risk of histoplasmosis, the terrifying physics of a dryer vent fire, the potential for catastrophic DIY failures, and the complex legal landmines surrounding native species, it becomes painfully clear why a highly disciplined systemic approach is required.
You can't just wing it.
Right. And that brings us to the operational details of the Critter team. The company was founded in June 2015 by Mike Garrett.
And the sources emphasize that Mike Garrett is a 20-year U.S. Army veteran.
20 years.
Yeah. That military background is highly relevant to the operational execution we are discussing. It establishes a very specific, rigid culture of accountability within the organization.
The company ethos is built entirely on the mandate to do it right the first time. There is no room for half measures when dealing with biohazards and fire risks.
Right.
They have won the Animals Happen Excellence Award, but the credential that really anchors their expertise here is that their technicians are officially bird barrier certified installers.
Which is a big deal in this industry.
They possess specialized training in deploying commercial-grade netting, high-tension wire systems, and optical deterrents.
Another critical operational differentiator in the wildlife control industry is their labor model. They rely on zero subcontractors. None. Every single step, the initial biological inspection, the legal extraction, the military-grade physical exclusion, and the hazardous cleanup is executed exclusively by their own in-house, heavily trained staff.
That makes a lot of sense.
It creates an unbroken chain of custody for the project. The technician inspecting the vent is directly accountable to the technician permanently sealing the vent. There is no plausible deniability, no passing the buck to a third-party contractor who might cut a corner.
But the section of the sources that really caught my attention was their absolute obsession with the physical materials used in the exclusion process.
Oh, the material science side of things.
Yes. The documents insist that these exclusion materials must be specifically engineered to survive the brutal, extreme heat and punishing humidity of the Houston geographical area. They strictly utilize galvanized or powder-coated heavy hardware. They explicitly forbid the use of structural spray foam. They banned the use of steel wool. And honestly, this made me wonder, why go through the immense expense and labor of custom cutting and fitting galvanized metal when you could just grab a $5 can of expanding spray foam from the hardware store and blast it into the soffit gap in 10 seconds?
What's fascinating here is, well, how violently the Texas climate will humble and destroy substandard material science. Material science is the completely unsung hero of wildlife exclusion.
Really? Spray foam is that bad?
Spray foam is incredibly popular for DIY projects because it requires zero skill to apply, but it is fundamentally just polyurethane. When polyurethane foam is exposed to the intense, sustained ultraviolet radiation of the Houston summer sun, the UV rays actively break down the polymer bonds within the foam itself.
Oh, wow.
It undergoes rapid photodegradation. The foam expands in the heat, bakes, becomes highly brittle, and within a single calendar year, it crumbles into dust.
So it just falls apart.
It falls out of the gap, often leaving a jagged hole that is actually larger and more inviting to birds than the original structural flaw.
It essentially creates a worse problem while giving you a false sense of security. And what about steel wool? People love stuffing steel wool into cracks because the abrasive texture stops rodents and birds from chewing through it.
Yeah, but steel wool relies on the structural integrity of thin iron fibers. In a high humidity environment like the Lake Houston corridor or anywhere near a modern suburban sprinkler system, that iron undergoes rapid oxidization.
It rusts.
Exactly. The steel wool physically rusts out and disintegrates in a matter of months. Worse, as it breaks down, the oxidized iron bleeds out with the rain, leaving massive, permanent, rust-colored streaks running all the way down the exterior brick or siding of the home.
So you think you saved a few bucks fixing the hole, but 12 months later, the structural gap is back, your exterior architecture is permanently stained, and a new flock of starlings is moving right back into your attic.
Exactly why material selection is paramount. The Critter team backs their exclusion work with written warranties for either 1 or 3 years, depending on the architectural scope of the project. A warranty is mathematically useless if the physical materials you install are chemically guaranteed to degrade in the sun.
Right, that makes total sense.
Galvanized metals and powder-coated finishes chemically resist UV radiation degradation. They repel the humidity. They do not rust. Utilizing those specific materials is the literal physical translation of the do it right the first time military ethos.
So what does this all mean? It means that ignoring a scratching sound in your wall or a bird flying out of your vent is simply not an option.
No, definitely not.
Being highly informed about the mechanics of these hazards protects your physical property from catastrophic fire, it protects your family's respiratory system from dormant fungal pathogens, and it shields you from accidentally triggering federal and state wildlife violations.
It's a lot to manage on your own.
The documents make a point to highlight that for people living in the Northeast Harris County area, specifically operating out of the Humboldt and Huffman regions, places like Wildwood, Lake Houston Forest, or along the FM 2100 corridor, this is not a burden you have to shoulder alone.
No, teams with this specific intersection of biological knowledge, legal awareness, and material engineering are built precisely to navigate these complexities for the homeowner.
The sources note that the Critter team runs a 247 hotline. You can reach their operations at 281-667-0171. One call initiates the biological inspection, the legally compliant removal, the durable exclusion, and the biohazard remediation, all managed by a single, accountable, in-house team.
It is a profoundly comprehensive, engineered approach to a biological hazard that most homeowners do not even realize they are harboring until it reaches a critical failure point.
Very true.
And looking at all this data, it leaves me with a lingering, provocative thought about the future of human habitats. We have spent this entire time analyzing how modern architectural practices, from the suburban booms of the 1970s straight through to today, have inadvertently engineered the absolute perfect, predator-free, climate-controlled utopia for invasive cavity nesters.
Yeah.
The gaps, the synthetic vents, the failing sealants. It makes me wonder, how might future building codes and architectural engineering paradigms need to fundamentally evolve? Instead of constantly reacting with heavy-duty exclusion services decades after the fact, how can we proactively design homes that naturally and organically outsmart urban wildlife before the concrete foundation is even poured?
That's a great point, because right now, we are still building what we think are fortresses. But as we've learned today, until we drastically change the structural DNA of how those fortresses breathe and exhaust air to a sparrow or a starling, it's really just a luxury invincible birdhouse with the heat left on.